Subscribe to our channel Storylab for more gripping tales. Now let me take you into this one. I built a billion-dollar empire from nothing, but I never imagined the real threat would come from my own wife. What she and her lover did to our daughter nearly destroyed us, until I made sure they'd never forget who they betrayed. Ethan Walker sat in silence behind his large oak desk, watching the rain trace lazy paths down the glass walls of his executive office. At 45, he had carved Walker Biosystems out of nothing but grit and determination, turning a humble medical startup into a dominating force in the pharmaceutical world. Their latest advancement, a cutting-edge cancer therapy, was raking in billions, earning Ethan the reputation of a relentless tycoon who showed no mercy to those who stood in his way. "Mr. Walker," came the crackle of his assistant's voice over the intercom, jarring him from his thoughts, "your wife is on line 1. Ethan's jaw clenched as he reached for the receiver. "Rachel, what's going on?" Her voice was shaky. "It's Abigail. The hospital just called. She's taken a turn for the worse." Ethan's fingers tightened around the phone until his knuckles turned pale. Their daughter, just 19, had been fighting a mysterious, draining illness for months. It started subtly with extreme tiredness and strange bruises, but it had steadily grown into something terrifying. They'd seen countless specialists, but none had been able to pin down what was truly wrong. "I'm on my way," he said, voice cold and flat, before hanging up without another word. As he drove toward Boston Memorial Hospital, Ethan's mind churned through the past year. His marriage to Rachel had been crumbling in slow motion. They'd fallen for each other 2 decades earlier. He was just beginning to build his business, and she was a sharp, driven pharmaceutical researcher. She had this mix of brilliance and ambition that had captivated him. But somewhere along the way she had drifted. The signs had been creeping in for a while: secretive phone calls, sudden changes in schedule, a growing distance he could feel more than explain. Ethan wasn't the kind of man who ignored betrayal. Life had hardened him early. After losing both parents, he'd bounced through foster homes, clawed his way into college on scholarships, and willed his way into building an empire. He didn't survive all that by being gullible. So 3 months back he made a decision. He hired a private investigator. The results were clear as day. Rachel was involved with someone else, Dr. Daniel Morgan, the lead hematologist treating their daughter. The betrayal hit me like a slow-moving train, painful and inevitable, but I wasn't the type to explode. I was methodical, a man who believed in watching and waiting before making a move. So I decided to gather more evidence before deciding what to do next. When I arrived at the hospital, Rachel was already sitting at Abigail's bedside. My daughter looked even more fragile than she had the day before, her skin paler, her frame thinner, with a sickly yellow hue that made my chest tighten. "Dad," she whispered, managing the faintest smile. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" I asked, sitting beside her and wrapping my hand gently around hers. "The same, maybe a little worse," she murmured, her eyes welling up with tears. They mirrored mine, same color, same sadness. "They still can't figure out what's wrong." I glanced over at Rachel, but she avoided looking at me, focusing on a spot on the wall instead. "Where's Dr. Morgan today?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "He's with the toxicology team," she replied, and I noticed a faint blush rising up her neck. "He thinks there might be something environmental we've overlooked." I gave a slow nod. "I'd like to speak with him once he's back." Later that day Dr. Morgan finally walked in. He had the look of someone used to being in charge, tall, composed, with neatly styled salt and pepper hair. That mix of confidence and control, qualities I'd once respected in men like him, now put me on edge. "Mr. Walker." "Mrs. Walker." He greeted us with a nod. "I'd like to run a new series of tests on Abigail. Her condition is progressing in a troubling way." "What kind of progression?" I asked, my voice sharp. "One that aligns with symptoms of long-term low-level poisoning," he said carefully. "We haven't isolated a specific substance yet, but the signs are pointing in that direction." I turned to Rachel, catching something subtle flicker across her face. Was it fear? Guilt? Or something harder to read? "Run whatever tests you need," I said firmly. "Don't worry about the cost." That night, I sat alone in my study, combing through the documents my investigator had pulled together. Rachel and Dr. Morgan had been secretly meeting for at least half a year. But something else gnawed at me. Their encounters often aligned suspiciously well with the worsening stages of Abigail's illness. The pattern was too precise to ignore. That night, I unlocked the small safe tucked behind the bookshelf in my study and pulled out a voice recorder, one of several I had quietly planted around the house. At first, I'd used them just to confirm the affair. But something I'd captured 3 days ago had been haunting me ever since. I hit play. It's taking too long, Rachel's voice crackled through the speaker. Her body stronger than we thought. We need to be careful, Morgan replied, his tone controlled. If we raise the dosage too quickly, it'll show up on the tox screens. It has to appear organic. And what about Ethan? Rachel asked, her voice low. After she's gone? He'll be broken. That's when we move forward with the rest of it. My finger hovered over the stop button as my pulse thundered in my ears. They weren't just cheating. They were deliberately poisoning Abigail, my daughter, as part of some twisted scheme. I sat there, gripping the edges of my chair. I didn't feel fear. I felt fire. This wasn't going to be forgiven. But first, I had to protect my little girl. At dawn, before Rachel had even woken, I was already at the hospital. I brought someone with me, Dr. Sofia Rivera, a respected toxicologist from another facility I had quietly reached out to the night before. I need an independent workup, I told her quietly in the corridor, making sure no one else could hear. And absolute discretion. She gave a sharp nod. Based on what you've shared, I'll check for thallium and other slow-acting toxins. These symptoms can match exposure to heavy metals administered gradually. While she took blood and tissue samples from Abigail, I waited outside her room, watching every hallway for signs of trouble. When Rachel showed up about half an hour later, I smoothly steered her toward the cafeteria under the pretense of needing a quick break. It was just enough time for Dr. Rivera to finish. You seem distracted, Rachel said as we sat across from each other, two untouched coffees growing cold between us. Our daughter is dying, I answered, my voice ice. How exactly should I look? She reached across the table and placed her hand on mine. I had to clench my jaw to resist pulling away. We'll get through this, she whispered. Together. Will we? I asked, holding her gaze with a steady, burning stare. Before Rachel could reply, my phone buzzed against the table. It was a message from Dr. Rivera. Samples collected. Preliminary results available in 6 hours. That afternoon, while Abigail rested fitfully in her hospital bed, Dr. Morgan approached us in the hallway outside her room. I'd like to initiate a new treatment protocol, he said, slipping into his usual calm tone. It's still in the experimental phase, but given how rapidly Abigail's condition is declining, I believe it's worth considering. I kept my eyes fixed on his face, searching for any trace of deception. What exactly would this protocol involve? I asked, voice level. An aggressive regimen of chelation therapy combined with... No, I cut him off sharply. There won't be any new treatments until I've reviewed all her current test results and consulted with a second specialist. His expression shifted, tightened. There was an edge behind his professional facade now. Mr. Walker, with all due respect, time is of the essence. Then we shouldn't waste time on unproven methods that could make things worse, I replied, voice like steel. I want copies of every medical record, every test result, today. The air between us grew tense. After a brief pause, Morgan nodded tightly and walked off to start the process. Rachel turned to me, her face pale and anxious. What are you doing? She whispered, her voice filled with unease. Daniel is trying to save her. Is he? I asked quietly, eyes never leaving hers. Or is he the reason she's getting worse? She flinched. What are you saying? I think you know exactly what I mean. Before the tension could escalate further, my phone buzzed again, another message from Dr. Rivera. She needed to speak with me right away. I left Rachel in the hallway and met Dr. Rivera in a private consultation room nearby. Thallium, she said without any hesitation. Preliminary analysis shows elevated levels, consistent with repeated exposure over the course of several months. My stomach twisted even though I had already feared the worst. Can it be reversed? With the right chelation therapy, yes, she said. But not with the approach Dr. Morgan suggested. That would have intensified the toxicity. Thank you, I said quietly, already mapping out what had to happen next. Please document every detail of your findings, and call the police. I'll take care of the rest. That evening, Abigail's condition took a sharp turn for the worse. A sudden call from the hospital jolted Rachel and me back to Abigail's side. The urgency in the nurse's voice had sent a cold shiver down my spine. When we stepped into her room, I felt the floor drop beneath me. Abigail was lying on her side, her hospital gown slightly pulled down at the back. What I saw made my breath catch. Dozens of small puncture marks, tiny but undeniable, covered the skin along her back. Each one placed in careful, concealed areas that would be hidden by clothing. It was clinical. Intentional. A uniformed officer silently snapped photos while Dr. Rivera spoke in a low, steady voice. These marks are consistent with repeated thallium injections. The pattern, the placement, it's deliberate. How could this happen? I demanded, my voice rising with perfectly measured outrage. Who could even get close enough to do something like this? Detective Brent McAllister, a seasoned investigator with the Boston PD, scanned the room with a practiced eye. That's what we're going to determine. As of now, this is officially a criminal investigation. No one administers anything to Miss Walker without direct oversight from the department. Rachel stumbled slightly, catching the edge of a chair for support. This is madness, she muttered, her face pale. You don't actually think? Mrs. Walker, the detective said, cutting her off firmly. I'll need to interview each of you separately. A short time later, I stood just outside the corridor, watching silently as two officers blocked Dr. Morgan from stepping into Abigail's wing. His expression darkened, fury twisting across his face as he was led into a conference room for questioning. While Rachel sat through her interview, I quietly made my way to a different part of the hospital where I had a prearranged meeting. The head of security was already waiting. I need every second of surveillance footage showing who entered or exited my daughter's room for the last 3 months, I said, calmly placing a thick envelope, containing a generous donation to the hospital's foundation, on the desk between us. That night, Rachel was ordered home, now under close police watch. I stayed at the hospital, never leaving Abigail's side. I had hired 2 private security guards of my own to make sure no one could come near her without my approval. Dr. Rivera, now officially under law enforcement supervision, started the correct chelation treatment. In a quiet moment, with the machines beeping softly around us, Abigail stirred. Her hand, weak, trembling, reached for mine. Dad, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I heard them once. My breath caught. Mom and Dr. Morgan? They thought I was asleep. They were talking about doses, and about you, Abigail whispered, her voice cracking. My chest tightened until it felt like I could barely breathe. I forced a gentle tone, brushing a strand of hair from her face. You don't need to think about that right now. Just rest, baby girl. You're safe now. Tears slipped from the corners of her eyes. They wanted your company, Dad, she said, her words heavy with pain. Mom said, once I was gone, she'd inherit her part. And if you were grieving, if you broke down, she and Dr. Morgan could force you out during the merger. I stood frozen, my thoughts suddenly sharper than they'd ever been. The Walker-Bergman merger, a massive $30 billion consolidation that would hand control to whoever held the largest share. If I were deemed emotionally unstable in the wake of Abigail's death, Rachel's sudden inheritance could tip the balance and lock me out of my own company. Abigail, I said, leaning in close, my voice steady but full of fire, they will never lay another finger on you. And they will answer for everything they've done. I swear it. In the days that followed, Abigail slowly began to recover under the proper treatment regimen. But while she regained her strength, I was already moving. Yes, the police were involved, but I'd lived long enough to know the legal system often drags its feet. I wasn't willing to leave justice entirely in their hands. First, I leaked carefully selected information to the media, through anonymous, untraceable channels. Within hours, headlines blazed across the internet. Renowned hematologist and businesswoman suspected in daughter's poisoning. The fallout was immediate. Walker Biosystems stock nosedived. That triggered a poison pill clause I had discreetly written into the merger agreement months ago, a clause only I knew how to activate. The merger collapsed overnight, taking Rachel and Morgan's power play with it. But that was just the beginning. I still had the passwords to Rachel's private email accounts, backups I'd stored away back when I first suspected the affair. When I logged in, what I found turned my stomach. There were messages, dozens of them, between her and Morgan. Some filled with romantic language. Others clinical, calculated, mapping out dosage schedules, delivery methods, even contingency plans if Cassidy's condition improved too quickly. I bundled the emails and sent them anonymously to Detective McAllister. Within 48 hours, both Rachel and Dr. Morgan were in handcuffs, charged with attempted murder. But I wasn't interested in just watching them go to trial. That would be too easy. Too clean. I wanted them dismantled. And so, I made the next call, to someone I knew on the state medical board. Dr. Daniel Morgan's license was now under review. As whispers of the case spread, more shadows from Dr. Morgan's past began to emerge. Quiet rumors turned into chilling evidence. Former patients who had died under odd, unexplained circumstances were suddenly part of the conversation. The medical board had no choice but to act. His license was officially suspended, pending a full investigation. But for Rachel, I had something far more precise in mind. With the help of my financial team, I tracked down a secret offshore account holding over $2 million, funds she had been slowly siphoning from our joint assets for years. I didn't touch a cent. Instead, I sent an anonymous tip straight to the IRS, complete with account numbers and transaction dates. Let them unravel that thread. Then I delivered the finishing move. I reached out to the families of former patients who had lost loved ones under Dr. Morgan's care, people who had no idea how deep the rot went. With the help of my investigative team, I provided them with resources, documentation, and the legal support to file civil suits. By the time the dust settled, 10 separate lawsuits had been filed. Each one demanded millions in damages from both Morgan and Rachel. But for all that I orchestrated behind the scenes, my real reckoning came face to face. As Abigail continued to heal, I made my way to the detention center and sat across from Rachel. Separated by a thick pane of glass, we were finally alone. "Why?" I asked. No rage, no theatrics. Just a quiet, sharp question. She leaned forward, looking worn and defeated in the orange of her prison uniform. "You were always buried in that company," she said, her voice cracking. "You never really saw me. What I brought to the table. What I deserved. So your answer was to murder our daughter?" I said, my voice eerily calm. "It wasn't supposed to be like that," she whispered. "Landon said she'd just slip away. Peacefully. And then, with my share and your grief, we'd be in control." "You miscalculated," I replied flatly. "Not just about me but about Abigail. She's stronger than either of us ever gave her credit for." Tears pooled in her eyes. "Victor, please. I'll testify against Landon. Say he manipulated me, that I didn't understand what he was doing. With your connections you could help reduce the charges." I leaned closer, eyes locked on hers. "I didn't come here to help you, Rachel. I came to tell you what's already in motion." She stared at me silent. "Your hidden accounts? Frozen. Your parents' house, the one you quietly put in your name? Seized in the civil suits. And the prenup you signed?" I gave a slow nod. "It had a morality clause. You're entitled to nothing." Her face paled. "You can't do this," she whispered, horror spreading across her features. "I already have," I said. "By the time you step out of that cell, if you ever do, you'll have nothing left. No money. No home. No reputation. You'll be remembered as a mother who tried to murder her own daughter, for a bank balance," I said quietly. Rachel's eyes, once pleading, now burned with fury. "I'll fight this," she hissed. "With what?" I asked, my voice calm, almost gentle. "Your attorney quit this morning after your retainer check bounced. I've made sure that no reputable law firm in the state will take your calls. You're out of moves." I stood up, straightened my jacket, and delivered the final blow. "Cassidy wanted me to tell you something." Rachel blinked, her anger wavering. She said she finally understands why, in nature, some animals eat their young. Because not every creature is meant to be a parent. The trial came quickly and hit like a wrecking ball. With the evidence I'd carefully compiled, audio recordings, email correspondence, financial records, and expert testimony, the verdict was inevitable. Rachel was sentenced to 25 years, no chance for parole. Dr. Morgan, who had betrayed not just his patient but his oath, received 30. But I wasn't done. Using quiet channels and trusted intermediaries, I made sure the full details of their crimes trickled through the prison system. Inmates have their own kind of justice, and people who harm children are treated as the lowest of the low. Neither of them would find peace, not even behind bars. 6 months later, I sat on the back patio of my Nantucket home, a glass of iced tea in my hand, watching the sun sparkle on the Atlantic. Cassidy was out on the sand, laughing with friends as they played a casual game of volleyball. Her strength had returned, body and spirit. My phone buzzed. "News alert, Dr. Landon Morgan found dead in cell. Apparent suicide." I stared at the screen. Felt nothing. Just the quiet, steely relief of justice fulfilled. Later that evening, Cassidy curled up beside me as we watched the waves roll in, orange fading to deep blue over the horizon. "Dad," she said softly, "do you ever regret how far you went with him? The lawsuits, the ruin, all of it?" I thought for a long moment, then turned and met her eyes. "They planned to take your life, slowly, cruelly. They betrayed everything a family should be. Marriage vows, a doctor's duty, a mother's love. And they did it all for control and money." I reached over and took her hand in mine. "I made a promise a long time ago," I said. That if anyone ever came for my family, they wouldn't just be stopped. They'd be broken. I don't regret a single thing, I said and meant every word. Cassidy didn't flinch. She simply nodded, understanding now the fire that had fueled me, the cold resolve that had shielded her when she couldn't protect herself. Then she asked, her voice softer, curious but grounded, "What about forgiveness?" I turned my gaze toward the horizon, where the last traces of sunlight faded into the deep blue of the Atlantic. My jaw tightened. "Forgiveness is for those who can afford to be weak," I said. "Justice, the kind that actually matters, is something you take with both hands. Some debts don't get settled with apologies. They have to be paid in full." Almost as if the universe wanted to underline the moment, my phone buzzed again. I glanced at the screen. It was from my contact inside the women's correctional facility. Rachel had been hospitalized, an incident with other inmates. Details were vague but the message was clear: she'd survive. Barely. Her pain was only beginning. I turned off the phone and looked at Cassidy. She was watching me closely. "Some people think revenge is about getting even," I said, voice low and calm. "It's not. It's about making sure they truly understand, deep in their soul, what they tried to do. Your mother and Morgan? They'll have years, decades even. Time to sit with what they did. Time to feel it." Cassidy leaned gently against me, resting her head on my shoulder. The sky darkened above us and the sound of the waves filled the silence. And for the first time in a long time we sat together in peace. In the boardroom, Ethan Walker had built a legacy as a ruthless strategist. Someone who dismantled competitors without hesitation. But Rachel and Dr. Morgan had learned a far harsher truth. His vengeance, when personal, was far more precise. Far more permanent. It was methodical. Unforgiving. And absolute. Ethan didn't just save his daughter's life. He preserved his company, crushed a betrayal that had clawed its way into his home, and reminded the world of the principle that had always guided him. No one betrayed Ethan Walker and walked away untouched. There were no second chances. Only exacting consequences, meted out with interest that compounded daily, for as long as he decided the debt remained. And in Ethan's ledger, some debts weren't meant to be paid off. They were meant to be remembered. This brings our story to a close. I'd love to hear what you think. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for your time. If this story moved you, inspired you, or just kept you hooked, consider subscribing to the channel. It truly helps. And so, the final chapter of this twisted tale was written not in courtroom transcripts or financial ledgers, but in the quiet moments that followed, the stillness after the storm. Ethan Walker had done more than expose betrayal. He had turned the tables on those who tried to dismantle the very heart of his world. Through fire and calculation, through pain and purpose, he ensured that justice wasn't just served, it was etched into the lives of those who dared cross him. Rachel and Dr. Morgan didn't just lose. They fell, from positions of power, from illusions of control, into the cold, merciless judgment of a man who'd already survived worse. But in the end, this wasn't just about revenge. It was about a father and his daughter. About survival. About love so fierce it could not be poisoned. And about a truth Ethan had carried with him since the day he stood alone in a foster home with nothing but his will to rise. Those who try to destroy what I love, do not walk away. Some wounds never fully heal. Some wrongs are too great for forgiveness. And some victories, like Cassidy's life, her laughter echoing down a Nantucket beach, are worth everything. Justice in its purest form is never gentle. It is earned. It is exacted. And it never forgets.